I feel like the idea that our show brings so much joy and levity to the table is something that's underappreciated and underreported in a way. I think people tend to think of our show sort of the emotional roller coaster that we all go on, and that is very much a part of who we are. But I just don't think you can discount the other side of the coin. It's very much what the dynamic that sort of makes our show work. And again, I just don't think Dan and our writers give enough credit for that. And you look at characters, whether it's like Sully or Sterling or Justin, like they all are, their characters are funny, and Beth, like Susan, these are people and characters that like constantly bring, I think, the funny to the table and the sarcastic, and that's just as much like a part of life as anything else. Like it's sort of what makes the world go round. So I'm happy that this particular episode, the premiere episode, sort of nods to that maybe more than what people are expecting from our show. I mean, I think when you're lucky enough to be on a show like this that sort of has found an audience like we have, to be able to, have that direct connection to an audience and for them to sort of see themselves in these characters really speaks to the universal appeal of what the magic that I guess we've sort of found. It's incredible. I mean, I feel the same way. I read the script and obviously I feel like I relate most to Rebecca because it's like wearing a comfortable pair of shoes at this point, but I can see myself in bits and pieces of every single character. And again, I think that just speaks to how elevated the writing is, but also how grounded it is at the same time. Oh my gosh. It's crazy. I've never done television really before the show. Certainly not 54 episodes of television. So it's hard to like think back to the last 3+ years of my life and a show like this that is so emotionally charged and rich. And I mean, it boggles my mind to think back to some of the stuff we did in season 1. I mean, I guess my heart sort of goes back to season 1 because it was such a new experience for us, and navigating like the inroads of these characters and figuring out, for me at least, like it's hard to pinpoint one exact moment because, I have this delicious challenge and the greatest challenge probably of my professional life of portraying this woman from her mid-20s to her, now we found out last season, like mid-80s. So that's a lot of life, and it was certainly overwhelming initially, but I feel like I really found my groove in the middle of season 1 of like, not overwhelming myself with having to know every single answer to the story of this woman's life. You sort of just take the information as it comes to you and sort of piecemeal it together. But now I feel like I have this really complex understanding of who she is, and I have this like 360-degree view of everything.
Mandy and I talk a lot about where Jack and Rebecca happen to be, and how much we look forward to the simpler, happier times. It's not Jack in war. It's not Jack and Rebecca dealing with alcoholism or even Jack's death. It's the new love. It's discovery. It's also beyond that. It's the moments when you're really figuring out if it's going to work. Taking these two individuals that deeply care about each other, but figuring out, it's like, well, does this fit? Does your world and my world fit outside of, the vacuum that maybe we occupy when it's just us? Does it work? Does it fit? So it's fun. In that first episode, we have a lot of that. You absolutely have to have levity, but that's part of life. There are emotional, trying moments in the show, and there are times when everybody's like, "Oh God, I cried," and I'm like, "But you're happy about crying. You're hopeful about crying." There's something that this show is able to do where it inspires people to be better in their lives, communicate more, understand more, and that comes beyond the point of, "Oh man, I'm hurting." That That's the rise of, no, I'm healing, or the rise of, oh no, this is the better part of life. And personally, that's what I think of when I see this show. I don't think about tissue boxes. I don't think about devastation. I think about hope. I think about the best part of life that's discovered, and you get to really, really embrace because you're seeing it and you're locked in on it, and it's real. It's just real. As storytellers, it doesn't make any difference to us, you know. I think it adds excitement because it gives us a real roadmap. I mean, as an actor, I've done shows where you just don't know if you're going to be around or not, and you're really hoping. But I think this is also a very confident moment for the audience to invest in their time with us. And they know that we're working toward, I don't want to say an end or a closure or a wrap-up, but we have a lot of time still to spend with this family. And I think it's an exciting thing to be a part of a show that is willing to do that for their audience and willing to do that for themselves. I've seen the end. I know the end. I know a lot of it, and getting up to it is going to be a lot of fun. I think people relate to the stories because they're very simple and easy to understand. You know, there are many fathers out there. There are many husbands. There are many wives. There are many mothers. There are fundamental roles we have in society, in different cultures, that everyone gets to experience. You know, the joy of family, the loss of family, the joy of parenthood, I have no idea what that's like of parenthood. Being a son, being a daughter. They're the most fundamental experiences of humanity, and everyone goes through them. So to see these stories on screen and to know that their lives, the audience, is not too dissimilar from our lives, the players, I think that is what makes people really embrace the show. Is, oh, those are my stories up on that screen. It's not just Jack and Rebecca or Kevin, Kate, and Randall. Like, that's my story.
It's really about, so I mean, it's a story about the Pearsons, but it's really a story about humanity, right? And just the universal themes, the trials and tribulations that we all have to endure as people. And I don't know if it would be the same way if the show was called something else, but the show is about us. Like, when you watch it, you should see yourself, right? A woman came up to me in the airport and she said, "You don't know what you did," right? I was like, "No, I don't," but I'm sure you're about to tell me. And she said, "The way that you and Beth dealt with your daughter coming out, you had a level of grace that I was not able to have with my own child. But I was able to see what grace looks like, and I'm going to do better." If that's not why you do it, like, you know, to really affect somebody's soul and make them want to be a better person, it doesn't get any better, man. Like, I love the show. Yeah, they do. Like, they say, like, "Oh God, I can't wait to cry again," and everything like that. I'm like, I get it. Like, there's something very cathartic, very purging about sort of just letting it out, right? I think the show gives people permission to let stuff out that you don't even realize that you've been holding on to. But I think you don't get to that place of catharsis without the high, right? You need the peaks of life in order to feel the lows. Otherwise, if it's all flat or if it's all low, it's just like, this is depressing, right? So I don't think our show is depressing. Even though you cry, ultimately it is uplifting. And I think those moments of joy are what allow people to come back week in and week out?
It feels really good to be back at work. I really am excited for what's coming up next. I just feel like last year was such an adventure, and it left us in such a place to do something totally new, especially in our household. So I'm really excited about what's going to happen now. There is like a lot of lightness, and I like one of the people comes to mind. Like I love watching Justin and all of his scenes, and the way that anytime we kind of go too far in one direction, we always kind of bring it back in the other direction. We always make sure there's some kind of laugh or some kind of way to come out of anything that gets too heavy. And I love that Beth gets a lot of like funny lines and things that I enjoy saying and enjoy playing. And there are moments even between Beth and Randall that are light. It's just them trying to, experience parenthood together or experience, this relationship thing together. And there's a lot of playfulness to it. There's playfulness with Jack and Rebecca, with Toby, especially, he and Kate have a lot of playfulness. So I think there's a good balance that goes on. I don't think we ever go too far in one direction without bringing it back to the lighter side. People are connected to This Is Us it's just what you said, the storylines and the I guess all the things that we speak about are things that people go through. Just to put it plain, I think we're taking everything that's just ripped from the headlines of our lives, and saying like it's okay to talk about them. I just did a film, and one of the lines in it was, if it's mentionable, it's manageable. If it's mentionable, it's manageable. And there's something about that resonates in our show of like, if we can talk about this, somehow we can manage this. And it's about not hiding, but sort of revealing ourselves to one another. And saying that, really putting the responsibility of family, the real responsibility is that family has to be there for us regardless, right? And so we keep calling our family to that task of like, I'm gonna reveal this about myself, I need you to still be there for me, that type of thing. And so I think all those things really resonate with people as a chance to just kind of see ourselves and be with ourselves and maybe explore the things that we don't usually even talk about. But, if it's mentionable, it's manageable, right? Yeah, people talk about how emotionally moving it was, and one of the things that, they talk about Eris's beautiful performance and how sort of heartbreakingly real that was, but also the way that Randall and Beth handled it was a great example of just loving somebody through. You may not know how to get through it in the moment, but you know that you still love this person and you want them to express themselves, and be honest. I think that's the most important thing. I would much rather know and feel so proud of my child for coming to me with that information than have them hide it and feel ashamed, the worst thing is to do stuff in the dark. You feel so ashamed, you feel guilty, you feel all these things. When you can, be open and honest and have your family there to be with you, support you, help you through it and guide you through. And so that was most important to me. I think that has to be a conversation, especially in this country, so that people don't feel that they have to hide or, feel shame about themselves or what they're going through, about their sexuality, all of these things. So that was a really that was a really landmark moment for the season, I think.
Yeah, I'm not surprised that the story is surprising and that the story is as deep as it is and as emotional. But I'm always shocked and impressed with how the writers are able to continue to come up with all this great material that they just seem to just have a knack for year after year. So he finds himself kind of in a difficult place. He found love again, which doesn't happen to a lot of people. So he found himself sort of in a happy place. He felt lucky. He sort of thought he had his life in order. And then this giant bump in the road, which is he wants to be a father, and he's with this woman who he's in love with who doesn't want children. So that becomes a deal breaker, and they both kind of mutually and very sadly decide to sort of go their own ways. And now he's kind of in a place, honestly, where he has time to himself and time to sort of reflect and try to stay as healthy as he possibly can. And I think we're going to see him slow down a bit and look inside a little bit more than he has been, and take a little time with himself and be more comfortable spending time with himself and getting to know himself. I know that that sounds kind of strange because here he is, 39 years old, and it's like he doesn't know who he is yet, but he really doesn't, you know? He's sort of figuring himself out. So he does that. He also reconnects with a few family members without giving too much away. That starts kind of fairly early on in the season and then continues throughout. And that'll fulfill him as well. So hopefully he's on this journey of sort of, you know, becoming healthier and more comfortable in his own skin. Well, I think, you know, just simply put, I think if you have a show about really heavy, pressing issues that people don't like to talk about all the time, sometimes it ends up looking like the news, right? And it's like, you know, there's something endearing about these characters when you're watching them go through these things that are, yes, they're difficult, but they're very much real life. And they're not on an island where it's like, oh, the Pearsons have all this bad luck. They really don't have bad luck. They have great luck as well. And this is just real life. And sometimes life is hard. But when you can laugh through it and when you can enjoy the good times, I think that's what makes them so endearing and so relatable to everyone else. They're not a pathetic family at all. Yes, we have, you know, struggles with fertility. We have death. We have, you know, alcoholism. We have drug abuse. We have people that die prematurely. We have all that stuff. But that's life, and life is also beautiful. And so they also have these great, you know, wonderful victories. You know, Kevin's got a great career now. There's love in the show. There's humor in the show. So they're a wonderful family that is just sort of like all of us, right? You have these great losses and these wonderful victories, and sometimes the pain is hilarious, to be honest with you. That's your way of dealing with it. At least in my family, sometimes it's like, are you kidding? You know what I mean? And it's actually kind of funny, these weird things that'll happen throughout your life. If you do see yourself in any of these characters, which I know that I do, in all of them, at some, you know, point throughout the season, I will look at Rebecca or Beth or Randall or Kate or Toby or Kevin and be like, that's me. And then I'll see how they react to something, and I'll be like, you know, if that ever happens to me again, I'm gonna react a little more like that. You know, it teaches you how to sort of deal with things, I think, without beating you over the head with it and saying, this is a life lesson, because that's not really what we do. But we just sort of tell real stories about life, and I think people get attached to that.
It's really hard to compare because they're all, of course, individually amazing, but this one for me in particular is special. Yeah, I don't think anybody saw this coming, so. Every single thing that happens, right? It's a ripple effect, and that we're all connected in some way, shape, or form. And that stands true for this episode. Obviously in a very personal way for Kate. So I'm really excited. Yeah, so we know that in the finale, Toby shows up and he says, well, they're on their way. And everyone's freaking out because they don't know if that includes Kate or Jack or what's happening. And so many people are asking, like, where's Kate? And I'm like, she could be at the dry cleaners. You never know. And because the story, as we've seen in the past three seasons, that nothing is necessarily linear. And so that's great to be playful and to not know where things are headed and what's ahead for each of these characters. But I say not to fret. I think the original magic really is these siblings in this really cool family that are just trying to figure out life and to deal with life on life's terms, and that there are these ups and downs, these peaks and valleys that we all are learning to navigate, and we don't know how. So the show, I think, sort of gives you an instruction manual, so to speak, of how do we do this. And if we've never felt anxiety or had weight issues or dealt with race issues or paternity issues, that, oh, this is how the Pearsons handle it. And I think because I've heard so many stories that it brings families closer together so they can talk about it. So if they have their own issues, they can say, oh, well, and this is us. This is how they handled it. And it makes things a little softer to open up and have a conversation about, which is really special. And I think that's what great art does, is it creates a new way of thinking, opens up your heart, your mind. And it's done that the show has done that from day one. And out of the gate, did you ever see a plus size woman on a scale on network television? No. And not like, an average size woman, but a plus size woman who's really struggling with something. Or have you ever seen a really successful man have an anxiety attack and have his brother console him? All of these things that we get to see, and it's sort of shown up in every single episode, and it consistently does. And I don't know how they do it, but I know that obviously it's changed my life, and it changes my family's life and so many people's lives. So I don't know, from the beginning, there are so many similarities from the pilot to like the finale of this last season. But they're also standalones as well, because you see this evolution of this family and these siblings, and how we're all affected by each other.
Episode 1 of season 4 is a starting over in many ways. So it is almost as if we are starting a new series, telling a new story. And this first episode is, it's definitely a throwback to how this all started. Yeah, a lot of fans who watch this show are always talking about how much they cry, or the emotion that it brings up. And I'm always a little like, I'm not as involved in those storylines. So I'm like, I'm not sure I think the show's pretty funny, at least from where I'm standing. So I think that the show, a lot of times the show's levity gets a little lost, but every single character in this show is very well balanced and very able to slide back and forth between drama and levity. Sterling K. Brown is extremely funny. Justin Hartley is one of the funniest people I've ever met. Chrissy is hysterical. So that's the balance of life too. Like as sad and as horrible as things get, there are also good and bright moments, and I think that this show has a lot of both. The characters are very specific. The storyline is very specific, and the more specific that this show gets, I think the broader an audience it reaches. The more specific it gets, the more inroads there are for people to relate to a character, whether it's as a brother or a mother, a father, a sibling, a best friend, a husband or a wife. And so as the seasons go on, I think we're just going to attract more and more people who find their way in to relating to this family. Yeah, I mean, they are new parents, so the challenges that come with that, the great ego death that comes with having a child, when worrying about yourself is no longer your top priority. For two characters who have maybe been a little selfish in past seasons, as all human beings are. So it'll be interesting to watch them shift from thinking only about themselves, then learning how to think about each other and take each other into consideration. And then once they've just about figured that out, just barely, turn their attention to this child, baby Jack. So it should be an eventful 4th season.